think your biggest enemy is outside you. Your boss, your circumstances, your bad luck. But Socrates, the man who influenced every philosopher who came after him, discovered something that will completely change how you see your own failures. Your biggest enemy isn't external. It's the voice in your head that convinces you to quit right before breakthrough. Socrates spent his life studying human behavior, not through books, but through conversations with real people facing real problems. And he noticed a pattern. The same pattern in merchants and politicians, in artists and soldiers. They weren't failing because they lacked ability. They were failing because they were secretly working against themselves. Socrates called this the enemy within, the part of you that sabotages your own success while convincing you it's protecting you. Here's what Socrates discovered that changes everything. Most people don't even know they're doing it. They think they want success, but their actions prove otherwise. They think they're trying their best, but they're unconsciously choosing failure. And the reason is deeper than you think. This video reveals Socrates' complete method for exposing self-sabotage, how to catch yourself in the act, how to understand why you do it, and how to stop. This isn't therapy. This isn't positive thinking. This is Socratic questioning applied to your own patterns of self-defeat. Stay with me, because once you see what Socrates saw, you'll never sabotage yourself the same way again. Socrates made his reputation asking simple questions that revealed uncomfortable truths. He would approach someone who claimed to want something and ask, "If you really want this, why aren't your actions aligned with getting it?" The person would give excuses. Socrates would ask more questions. Eventually, the real reason would emerge. They didn't actually want what they said they wanted. They wanted to want it, but they were terrified of having it. Socrates discovered that most self-sabotage isn't random, it's strategic. Your unconscious mind is protecting you from something it perceives as dangerous: success, visibility, responsibility, change. So it creates elaborate ways to ensure you fail while letting you believe you're trying to succeed. Socrates identified the first pattern through his conversations with aspiring politicians and merchants. He called it the fear of being seen. You say you want success, but success means attention. Attention means judgment. Judgment means the possibility of rejection. So unconsciously, you sabotage opportunities that would put you in the spotlight. You procrastinate on the presentation that could advance your career. You forget to follow up on the opportunity that could change your life. You create problems that require so much attention, you don't have time to pursue your goals. Socrates would ask, "Do you want success, or do you want the safety of invisibility?" Most people had never considered this question. They assumed they could have success without visibility, but Socrates knew better. Everything worthwhile requires you to be seen. And being seen requires courage most people don't think they have. But visibility wasn't the only fear Socrates uncovered. Through years of questioning, he discovered that people often sabotage themselves because they're more comfortable with known difficulties than unknown possibilities. Your current struggles give you identity, sympathy, and excuses. They're painful but familiar. Success would require you to become someone new, someone without your current problems, someone responsible for maintaining higher standards. That's terrifying. So you unconsciously choose familiar pain over unfamiliar growth. Socrates would engage people in dialogue about this, asking, "Are you committed to solving this problem, or are you committed to having this problem?" The question would reveal whether someone was genuinely seeking solutions or just maintaining comfortable complaints. One conversation Socrates had with a struggling merchant illustrates this perfectly. The merchant complained endlessly about his failing business, but refused every practical suggestion Socrates offered. Finally, Socrates asked, "What would you talk about with your friends if your business was successful?" The merchant realized that his struggles were the foundation of his social connections. His identity was so wrapped up in being the struggling merchant that success felt like losing himself. But the pattern that shocked even Socrates the most was what he discovered about potential and power. Deep down, most people know they're capable of more than they're currently doing. And that knowledge is scary, because if you're capable of more, then your current situation is partly your choice. That means you're responsible for changing it. It's easier to believe you're limited by circumstances than to face the weight of your own unused potential. So people create limitations that feel real but are actually self-imposed. They choose goals that are too small. They surround themselves with people who won't challenge them to grow. Socrates would ask, "What would happen if you stopped limiting yourself? What are you afraid you might become?" These questions revealed that most people weren't afraid of failure. They were afraid of success and everything it would require from them. Through his method of questioning, Socrates developed what he called the examined life, a way of living that involved constantly questioning your own thoughts, motivations, and actions. Most people live unexamined lives. They react to circumstances without understanding why. They repeat patterns without recognizing them. But Socrates proved that conscious examination could break unconscious patterns. He would spend time each evening reflecting on his day, not in judgment, but in curiosity. What did I do today that moved me toward my goals? What did I do today that moved me away from my goals? What story did I tell myself to justify actions that didn't serve me? These weren't casual questions for Socrates. They required honest answers, and honest answers revealed patterns he didn't know existed. Most people, when they honestly examine their days, discover they spend more energy avoiding their goals than pursuing them. But they disguise avoidance as productivity. They research instead of acting. They plan instead of executing. They learn instead of applying. Socrates developed a way of questioning this pattern. Are you preparing to succeed, or are you preparing to prepare? But Socrates knew that awareness alone wasn't enough. He had to understand why people created elaborate excuses for their avoidance. Through countless conversations, he realized that every excuse contains a hidden fear. His method became questioning excuses until the real fear emerged. You say you don't have time. Socrates would ask, if someone offered you $1 million to make time, could you find it? You say you don't have money. Socrates would ask, if your life depended on finding money, what would you do? You say you don't know how. Socrates would ask, if you had to learn, how would you start? The goal wasn't to dismiss legitimate obstacles. It was to distinguish between real obstacles and convenient excuses. Real obstacles require creative solutions. Convenient excuses just require honesty about what you're avoiding. Socrates became fascinated by the contradictions he observed in people's lives. Their words rarely matched their actions, and they seemed unaware of these disconnections. You say health is a priority, but you don't exercise. You say you want financial freedom, but you don't save money. You say relationships matter most, but you don't invest time in them. Socrates realized these contradictions weren't character flaws. They were information. They told him where people's conscious goals conflicted with unconscious fears. He would ask, what belief would someone need to hold to act the way you're acting? Often, this revealed beliefs people didn't know they held, beliefs that directly contradicted their stated goals. A woman might say she wanted love while consistently choosing unavailable partners. When Socrates questioned this pattern, she might discover she believed she was unworthy of healthy love, so she unconsciously chose partners who would confirm this belief. But Socrates' deepest insight came from understanding that behind every self-sabotaging action is a fear. Most people wouldn't acknowledge their fears because they judge them as weakness. Socrates created a non-judgmental way to investigate fear. He would ask, if you succeeded at this goal, what would you be afraid might happen? What would success require you to give up? Who would you disappoint if you changed? These questions revealed that fear isn't always irrational. Sometimes people are afraid of real consequences. Success might mean losing certain relationships. Growth might mean leaving comfortable situations. Achievement might mean accepting responsibility they're not sure they can handle. Socrates taught that acknowledging these fears reduces their power. Hidden fears control behavior. Acknowledged fears become manageable challenges. Once someone understood their patterns and fears, Socrates' method led to a choice point. They could continue unconscious self-sabotage, but now they'd be aware they were doing it. That made it harder to maintain. Or they could choose conscious risk-taking, knowing exactly what they were afraid of and why. Socrates would ask, now that you know what you're really choosing between, what do you choose? This wasn't about eliminating fear. It was about choosing direction despite fear, with full awareness of what you're facing. But after decades of questioning people about their self-defeating patterns, Socrates made a profound discovery that went beyond fear and comfort. Self-sabotage isn't just about fear of success or comfort with struggle. It's about identity. People sabotage themselves to maintain consistency with who they believe they are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, success feels like betraying your identity. If you see yourself as ordinary, extraordinary achievement feels false. If you see yourself as someone things happen to, taking control feels like lying. Socrates called this the prison of self-concept. People limit their actions to match their self-image, even when their self-image holds them back. Most people work harder to be consistent than to be successful. They'll sabotage opportunities that don't match their story about themselves. Socrates would ask, who would you have to become to achieve what you say you want? And are you willing to become that person? This question revealed why most attempts at change fail. People focus on changing behavior without changing identity. But behavior always returns to match identity. If you see yourself as undisciplined, you'll find ways to prove yourself right, even when you're trying to be disciplined. Socrates discovered that lasting change requires identity change. You have to become someone new, not just do something new. He developed questions to help people construct new self-concepts. Who am I when I'm at my best? What qualities does the person who achieves my goals possess? What would I need to believe about myself to take the actions I'm avoiding? These questions helped people build new identities that supported their goals instead of undermining them. But Socrates had a warning. Identity change feels like death and rebirth. Your old self will resist being replaced, even if the new self is better. That's why people often sabotage themselves most intensely right before breakthrough. The old identity is fighting for survival. Socrates' solution was gradual identity shifts, small actions that prove the new identity is possible, evidence that accumulates until the new self-concept feels true. You don't become disciplined by doing one perfect day. You become disciplined by doing slightly better consistently until discipline feels like who you are. Socrates developed daily practices around this insight. Every morning he would ask himself, what would the person I'm becoming do today? Every evening, what did I do today that proved I'm becoming that person? This created positive momentum towards new identity instead of negative momentum toward old limitations. The genius of Socrates' approach was that it didn't require willpower or motivation. It required curiosity and honesty. Instead of trying to force yourself to change, you simply became curious about why you weren't changing. Instead of judging your self-sabotage, you investigated it. Socrates proved that most people have more power than they use and more potential than they realize. The only thing standing between you and that power is your willingness to examine why you're not using it. He famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." He didn't mean you should become obsessed with self-analysis. He meant you should become conscious of patterns that operate unconsciously. Most people live reactive lives. Things happen, they respond automatically, then they create stories to justify their reactions. But Socrates lived a conscious life. He understood his patterns, questioned his motivations, and chose his responses. The difference isn't perfection. Socrates made mistakes too. The difference is awareness. When you're aware of your self-sabotage patterns, you can catch yourself in the act. When you catch yourself, you can choose differently. When you choose differently consistently, you change your identity. When you change your identity, you stop sabotaging the person you're becoming. This is why Socrates' method has lasted over 2,000 years. It's not just philosophy, it's practical psychology that works because it addresses the root cause of self-sabotage, unconscious patterns driven by hidden fears and limiting self-concepts. Take a moment now and reflect on your own patterns. Where do you consistently act against your own interests? What fears might be driving those actions? What would you have to believe about yourself to stop sabotaging your success? Who would you need to become? These aren't casual questions. They require honest answers that might be uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of awareness, and awareness is the price of freedom. Socrates proved that most people have more power than they use and more potential than they realize. The only thing standing between you and that power is your willingness to examine why you're not using it. If this video helped you recognize your own self-sabotage patterns, don't keep it to yourself. Comment below about which pattern you recognize most clearly. Share your commitment to examining your own behavior more consciously. And if this changed how you see your own obstacles, subscribe. This is just the beginning of learning to get out of your own way, because Socrates was right. The examined life isn't just worth living, it's the only life worth living. You'll never sabotage yourself unconsciously again, but more importantly, you'll never have to. And that's when real success becomes possible, when you stop fighting against yourself and start working with yourself, when you become your own ally instead of your own enemy, when you finally become who Socrates always knew you could be, someone who lives consciously, chooses deliberately, and acts in alignment with their highest potential.